Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, episode number 33 with Tyler Herrinton. Really cool conversation with an awesome guy. He's a wedding videographer and host of his own podcast that's focused on technology. So definitely check out all the cool stuff that we mentioned in this episode and the work that Tyler is doing. Really appreciate his time. And yeah, I know you'll really enjoy this episode, so get ready to plug in. And after this quick message from our sponsor, this is episode number 33 with Tyler Herrinton. Hey there, listeners. It's an honor to have our good friends at SwiftCake be a sponsor of the podcast because I've seen their work firsthand, and it's truly unlike any student leadership training I've experienced. They've been voted Best Student Leadership Program Unprecedented 5 times, so you know they must be doing something right. As a bonus for our listeners, SwiftCake is giving a $500 discount off their normal speaking fee if you mention Higher Ed Geek when you contact them. I highly recommend their trainings for your campus, as your students will be talking about it for months afterwards. It's really great stuff. Check them out, swiftcakehq.com, to learn more, and let them know I sent you. Now, back to the show. Yeah, and I feel like I'm envious of your setup there, because I'm still kind of like investing in getting everything like kind of set up. Like I now have like we moved to an apartment that has, you know, like a guest room that I kind of use for doing my work and stuff, so I can kind of like get out of the way. And now I'm like, oh, I have like space. I can like get everything that I've always wanted. Like, because I've been like mobile pretty much, like, or just like, oh, I'll just find a quiet space somewhere, like in the office or whatever. So yeah, I gotta get more stuff so I can feel more legit.
No, it doesn't. It does. See, most people can't tell the difference, and honestly, like sometimes it doesn't make that much of a difference between the Yeti. Because I mean, the first couple of my podcasts were on the Yeti, and I just have a problem with like wanting to buy like way more expensive things than I probably need. I justified it because I have a YouTube channel, and I never took any money out of it for like over a year, just because I never set up how to get all the money. So it was collecting money. I just wasn't taking it out. And I looked in there one day and I had like over $600 or something like that from just AdSense. So I was like, all right, I'm going to take this out. I'm just going to use this to buy all the podcast stuff that I want. That's how I justified it. But it's not really necessary. But
yeah, I guess because I'll talk to a lot of people about podcasting. It is that idea of like, certainly the more you put into it, the more you get out of it, or in terms of like the quality and that sort of thing. And it's worth, you know, even like investing like a little bit in. But I think it does, like at a certain point, yeah, like it's incremental. Like most people might not notice. It's like, well, technically the audio quality of the mic is like even better. And it's like a lot of people might not even be able to hear it. Like,
yeah, most people have no idea. You know, I mean, like even like Tim Ferriss doesn't use very expensive or fancy mics, and he has probably arguably like the most popular podcast in the world. So it's all relative, as long as people can hear you and they're listening, and everyone's listening on their phones or on their, you know, AirPods or earbuds or whatever anyway. So, you know, once everything gets edited and compressed and uploaded and downloaded and sent through those, it's all kind of like a wash at that point anyway. Yeah. But you know,
and sometimes it's like, like if the content is good, my philosophy is like, a lot of people aren't like, if it's not like pristine audio, is like, if the content is engaging, they'll probably listen to it, even if it's not like, you know, the most amazing thing.
Exactly.
So
you just got to get to a point where it's not distracting. That's what I always say. If you can get to a point where the audio is like not distracting because it's either so bad or so this or so that they can't understand what's going on. But then the funny thing is I'm talking into this fancy mic, but then almost everybody I interview for my podcast, they're either talking like into their, like, you know, the little mic on their headphones or into their computer. Like they don't have a fancy mic. So, you know, then half of this conversation sounds good and half of it doesand and I usually do less talking than they do. So
yeah, that is always a funny thing.
It's just fun. It's fun for me. Yeah.
Well, and I guess we'll talk more about that, like kind of in the body of the episode here. But I'm very curious, kind of like with your story and just like kind of the happenstance kind of connection that we had just as kind of fellow podcasters, and just kind of learning more like how you got into it and just kind of your professional journey and kind of the things that you geek out about and everything. It's always cool to hear from different people, because a lot of times I'll have people on that I know very well. So it's, you know, sometimes funny to talk through it where it's like, hey, I know, like it's for everybody else. So yeah, this is, you know, all good stuff for me to learn and can learn more about your journey and all that. So
for sure.
Yeah, really appreciate you taking out the time. But we'll go ahead and jump in here and start out as we always do. If you just want to introduce yourself quickly and kind of give the brief kind of overview of your professional journey and how you got to be where you are today. Then we'll dig into a couple of pieces.
Sure. So let's see. So my name is Tyler Herrinton, and I am a wedding filmmaker based here in Richmond, Virginia. My wife Ashley and I, we work together, and together we are the Herrintons. We started doing this together when we got married, which is about 5 years ago, and we've been doing it ever since. We both went full time with the business probably about 3 years ago. Mm-hmm. So kind of the way we fell into this whole thing is sort of funny. So I started out as a photographer back in high school. I took all the photography classes in high school. In my senior year, I was the TA for the photography teacher, and I got suckered into doing the yearbook somehow, just as a photographer. And I was doing all these photography related things. And when it was time to apply to college, everyone said, pick something that you're passionate about and pick a subject that you're good at. But I was a straight B student. I was very okay with Bs, and that was perfectly fine for me. So when I went to college, I had no idea what to choose. I think when I applied for accounting because my dad's an accountant, but I'm terrible at math. So that wasn't going to work out for me. So anyway, I eventually went in to college. I went to West Virginia University, and I went in as a photojournalism major because I said, I really like photography, and they told me that they didn't have a photography program, and they said that photojournalism was going to be the closest thing. So I went in, thought that was going to be great. Took the only 2 photography classes they offered as part of the major my freshman year, and they were all review of what I learned in high school. So I realized that there was going to be a lot more journalism and a lot less photography. So decided that wasn't really the route for me. Switched my major over to graphic design. I had gotten involved in a Christian organization on campus called Campus Crusade for Christ, or CRU, and through that I had sort of found this sort of need and passion for design and for making videos and things like that. So I thought the design route would be a good way for me to go. I got involved, went that route and ended up getting a degree in design. Took a ton of photography classes along the way because turns out they actually have a photography degree that you can get as part of the art program. Apparently my counselor didn't know that when I was a freshman, but that's kind of how it goes at a big university like that, I guess. But so sort of along the way, everyone kind of knew me as a photographer. And like a lot of people who do weddings, I kind of got started because a friend of mine was getting married, and he said, "Hey, I know you have a fancy camera. We can't afford a professional. Would you be able or willing to shoot my wedding?" I said, "Sure, whatever." He's like, "Yeah, I'll give you $200." And I was like, perfect. That's a ton of money. Great. That sounds amazing. So shot his wedding, and I spent a ton of time, so many hours on the internet, reading through blogs and on YouTube and all these different things, researching everything that I could about weddings and wedding photography and what to expect and what I needed. And I even went out and I, scrounged a bunch of money together, like kind of convinced my parents to give me like a little bit of money, and took some money I made from like DJing some weddings and all this stuff to buy a new camera for this. Like I kind of went all in on this, just not even really thinking it was going to become anything. I just wanted to do a good job for this guy's wedding. I thought it was a big, pretty important. And then so from there, everything kind of just started snowballing. It was a perfect time. It was kind of the perfect storm. I had a lot of friends who were graduating, a lot of friends who were, getting married and those types of things that didn't necessarily want a professional, quote unquote professional, and I started just doing more and more of my friends' engagements and weddings and things like that. Along the way, I bought that camera that shot video. I kind of started dabbling in video, and the same sort of deal. I made a video. I was DJing a wedding, and I had to go to the rehearsal dinner to set up all the sound system or whatever. And while I was there, I shot a bunch of random video clips, with my new fancy DSLR that shot video, put those together in a montage I made in iMovie, put it on Facebook, and a girl from back home, her mom saw it and reached out to me and said, "Hey, my older daughter is getting married next summer, so it's probably like 8 months away. Would you be interested or willing to film her wedding?" And I was like, I've never filmed a wedding before, but I've been doing photography and I started to invest in some photography gear. So I was like, yeah, sure. So the same sort of deal. I spent the next 8 months doing everything I could to research and sort of pour into what goes into wedding filmmaking and what do you need and what sort of gear do you have to have and how does that all work and whatever. So, went and did that wedding. And again, it went pretty well. I'm pretty proud of it considering it was my first ever wedding. And then from there, it just sort of took off. And it was, we're doing half of the weddings every year we're doing were photo, half of them were video. And my wife I got married soon after that, started doing it together. And like, I guess, as I say, sort of the rest is history. And we've been doing it ever since. And then just last year we dropped photo. So we're just doing video now. So weddings is our primary thing, but we also do a lot of video work for creative small businesses and entrepreneurs and help other, photographers and people like that in the wedding industry do things like courses and do promo films and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, so that's sort of like the short, long version of how I got to where I am today.
Well, I guess that's cool. And like part of it, one, just being like the self-taught part of it, because I think there's just a lot of pretty high quality content out there to like, if people are curious about learning pretty much anything. But like, because that was my path with podcasting. I'd always been a fan of the medium and just had an opportunity to work with a good friend to start one with the people who are listening probably know, like the Student Affairs Collective podcast, just like a higher ed focused one, and now sort of doing my own thing in a similar way, but just like it was still some of those like fundamentals that I learned now like 4 years ago doing weekly podcasts. Like I just did a lot of like Google searches and like really just kind of plugged in with content just to learn how to do it. And certainly just like doing it is a very good teacher, like just going out there and, maybe you mess up sometimes or just, you keep doing something and like, oh, I wish it would be easier to do this. And you might find a way to do that. So it's cool that was part of your journey. And I guess it's neat now, because I imagine the sort of being part of the kind of like wedding industrial complex, like that's could maybe be stressful, or just like, that sort of brand of customers could be difficult sometimes, I imagine, if people are very particular what they're looking for. But being able to like still do that, because it's always, people are always going to want to have those special moments kind of captured well, but sort of being like, okay, what else or what's next, and kind of keep a new challenge and keep it engaging and all that sort of stuff. But and you mentioned, I guess that funny slip up with your like academic advisor or whatever in college, but maybe if that was like something that helped you to be confident, like navigating your own way and like learning on your own or anything like that. But I mean, like, what were those kind of pieces of your college experience that were kind of like fundamental for you and really like gave you something personally and or professionally that you still use today?
Yeah, it's funny. I've been thinking about that, and I definitely think, because I feel like there's a lot of debate and discussion on the internet these days talking about like, is college worth it? Do you need a college degree for this or for that or whatever? Especially in the wedding industry. Obviously none of our brides are asking to see any sort of a degree or anything like that, right? They just want to see the experience. They want to see what you know. But I definitely think that college taught me a lot, and I learned a ton of really valuable things from being in the graphic design program, and a lot of it honestly was putting me out of my comfort zone. I went into I wanted to do graphic design. I knew I was interested in that, but in order to do that, you had to join the art department. It's an art degree. So I had to take all of the basic art classes. So I was doing drawing and, I had to take all the different art electives and do all these different things where I was making sculptures and making things out of duct tape and like doing all these things that were way outside of my comfort zone. I'd never taken a drawing class in my entire life. I had never done anything artistic in college or in high school. I only took photography things. Those were my only like art classes. So doing anything with my hands, all these different things. So I think that pushing me outside of my comfort zone is really good, and it forced me to sort of learn and experiment with new things and figure out like, hey, I can actually do these things that I would say, like normally I would say, like, I'm a terrible drawer. I can't learn how to do those things. I'm just not good with X, Y, or Z. But it forced me, because I didn't have a choice, to learn how to do those things, to push myself in that way. So that was a really big aspect, I think, of it, that at the time I just thought it was awful and I hated it. But looking back at it now, I can really see that did help me, kind of like push me in that direction. And then the way that the design program is set up at WVU, I think that they do a pretty good job of, they don't focus very much on the programs at all. So almost nothing that we learned was, in Photoshop, use this key or use this tool or do this whatever. It was very much focused on the creative process and the design process and how to go from, working with clients and how to take an idea and making it into fruition and how to go through all the different ideations and all those different things. And obviously we learned some technical things, like color theory and typography and those types of things. But as far as the programs and that stuff goes, that was all self-taught. So everything for that, they'd obviously show you a few things here or there that you needed, but if you wanted to do something beyond the scope of whatever they showed you in class, that was on you to figure it out. So that very early on taught me how to teach myself how to do things. So, using YouTube and using different blogs and just the resources of the internet to learn how to do this certain thing in Photoshop or Illustrator or whatever was super, super valuable. And And then the design degree helped me a lot so in starting our business. That's one of the things I think people have a really hard time starting a business, getting off the ground, is there's so many things you have to do on your own. Making your own website, making your own logo, making your own business cards, especially at the very beginning when you don't have any money. So that was super valuable for me, that for the first couple ideations of our website and business cards and all those things, I could do all that myself. And I had it wasn't perfect. And we've hired designers since then, just because I don't have time or the brain power to do all those things. But at the very beginning, making ourselves look as professional as possible, given the small budget that we had, and just using more time than money, was definitely super valuable. So yeah, I mean, I think I gained a lot from college, even if I'm not using my degree that much on a day-to-day basis.
Well, I guess you made kind of a willing choice, especially now, kind of pursuing more video and stuff. So I guess what is kind of engaging you a lot right now about the current work that you're doing? Like, what was that, maybe like that decision point? Because I'm always curious about those kind of points when you're just like, what, I have to kind of, there's just maybe this fork in the road, and it, I kind of have to make maybe like a hard decision. But, with the current work that you're doing, let's just talk a little bit more about that, of like how you came to kind of what you're focusing on now and just what you enjoy most about it.
Yeah. So like I said, I've been a photographer since I was in high school, which was, 10 plus years ago now, which makes me feel super old, even though I know that I'm not. But so for a long time, my identity was sort of wrapped up in that, that's Tyler, he's a photographer. Oh, who's that? Oh, Tyler Herrinton, he's a photographer. Like, that was sort of who I was, or who I thought that people associated me with photography. So dropping photography from what we offered for a long time was really, really hard. People have been telling us for years, friends in the industry, like, you guys just do video, you're so good at video, just stick with video. But that was really hard for me personally. So that took kind of getting over that hurdle and that sort of mental, identity crisis, maybe you want to call it. But once we were able to do that and decide, okay, no, we're just going to focus on video. We're going to be known as videographers, like the prime, like very good high-end wedding filmmakers here in Virginia, then it sort of like opened up a whole nother world of possibilities. So like I said, we do primarily weddings. We shoot between 20 and 25 weddings a year, my wife and I. So we just, this past weekend, we had a double header, shot two weddings, and that's pretty much what we do every weekend in the summer, more or less. We have a few weeks off here or there, but for the most part, especially in Virginia, people are really getting married between April and October, are kind of like the main months. So really, we don't shoot any weddings between November and March. Like, that's consider that our off season. So, and then in addition to that, like I was saying, we do things with other photographers, like courses, and we do promo films, and we do films for small local businesses and things like that. Things where we can use the skills that we have from doing weddings, kind of transfer that storytelling that we try and encapsulate in our wedding films, and bring that to people's businesses, bring those to other areas of life. And that's honestly, that's kind of where we're at, and that's what we do primarily, the primary work that we're doing. And I just really love the video aspect of things for a bunch of different reasons. One, it's really technical, right? There's a lot of technical knowledge and gear and things to research and stuff like that. And that's really just how my brain works. Ever since I was really little, I remember like buying my first ever cell phone and spending weeks researching and trying to find like the perfect first cell phone. It was a flip phone. They didn't have like specs. There was no screen. It was it was just, but I really wanted to get like the best one, and I had to like do all the research, right? So starting from all the way back then until now, so being in the video world is perfect for me, because there's so many things to research as far as like lenses and cameras and microphones and cables and this and that. There's so many, the possibilities are endless. So I really love that aspect of it, the creative storytelling part of it. But then just being in the wedding industry for us, we really love that, because we get to meet a ton of really, really awesome people. Every single weekend we're meeting new people who would probably never have a chance to interact with, but not only just meet them, but like meet them on this like deeper level. Obviously it's their wedding day, so we're seeing them in this very important day of their life, but also surrounded by like their friends and their family, and you get to see them in a different light than most people would probably ever get to see them. And there's something really special about that we really, we really enjoy. We really try and appreciate that as much as possible. But not only just knowing them in that aspect, but then taking that part of their story and taking what we're knowing and this interaction we're having with them and turning that into a film that they can have and they can remember for the rest of their lives, and hopefully, pass down to their children and their grandchildren and things like that. So what we're doing, having that weight and sort of that impact, also just makes that really, really special.
Well, I guess I think tapped on, I'm sure, because maybe you can talk a little bit more about like, because it's sort of like part of your sort of mosaic of the things that you do right now is, you do a podcast. And I think, sort of leading to the next question of like a thing that you geek out about, you're saying is like, you like the gear, like you like the tech, and, that's what your podcast focused on. So I guess maybe just talk through that sort of, that story of like, how you decided maybe that was just like you wanted to kind of play around with some new like toys and stuff, and it kind of snowballed from there or something. But I guess just talk about your podcast a little bit, because I know you just kind of you geek out about technology and just talking about it and kind of its role in our lives. And I'll say I listened to specifically the one that I like really resonated, because it sort of fits in but not really, the one episode that you did about The Price is Right. I was just like so captured by that, and I was just I was like, yes, I'm curious about every detail of what it's like to be in The Price is Right. But then everything else is like pretty much all kind of like technology focused for the most part and stuff. So but definitely recommend that episode as well as checking out all of them. But so I guess talk through that story of just sort of like starting the podcast and what that's kind of meant for you, and kind of why you keep doing it.
Sure. Yeah. So my podcast is called Ty's Tech Line, and it sort of formed out of my love and sort of passion for researching things and technology and things like that. I spend a ton of time, probably way more time than I'm willing to admit, watching YouTube videos and listening to podcasts and things like that. And it's always sort of been that way. And like I said, even going all the way back to like researching my first cell phone to literally anything. I just love like finding out like all the information. I sort of pour myself into whatever it is that I'm interested in. No matter what it is, I love like researching and finding out as much as I can about it, even if it's unnecessary information. I know way more information about Android phones that I'm never going to buy. And I've been an iPhone user for 10 years. I'm never going to switch to Android, but I can tell you the specs of all like the newest Android phones and things like that, just because that's just what's interesting to me and how my brain works. So I have all this information, and I've been like, spending all this time researching all these things. And I decided, I should probably do something with this information. So why not turn it into a podcast? And so that was part of it. And then also a lot of my friends and just like people in my life always seem to call me with technology questions like, hey, I can't get my printer to work, or hey, my phone's doing this weird thing, or hey, what camera should I buy, or hey, whatever it might be. I'm going to buy a new laptop. What laptop should I get? Whatever. So that's kind of where the name came from, because it became this kind of running joke with some of my friends. Like they would call me and I'd answer the phone, Ty's Tech Line, because I knew that they had a question about some sort of technological thing. So I kind of took that idea and that sort of just like general passion for technology and decided like, hey, okay, I want to do a podcast because one, I love podcasts. I've been listening to a lot of podcasts, and two, because it's something different. I do a lot of video editing. Obviously, we have a YouTube channel as well where we do, some education for wedding filmmakers and things like that, which I love, YouTube is a whole nother thing that I'm super passionate about and very interested in. But it's not a problem. But the only thing with that is that it's more editing, it's more filming, it's more talking about weddings and wedding films and things like that. And sometimes I just need kind of a break from that. And I want to do something that's just a little bit different, a little bit outside of that scope and outside of that world. So the podcast to me was a really great way to sort of start something new, challenge myself with sort of a new thing to learn. Like you talked about the gear. I love the idea of like learning more about audio and what goes into audio and all the microphones and all the cables and the interfaces and all the different things that I need and the editing and how to make it sound as good as possible. So of course, when I started the podcast, I went on a deep dive into the, world of YouTube, learning how to make a podcast and the best, the gear and the systems and the editing and all that sort of stuff.
Right.
And just something different, like I said, different for my brain to sort of unwind and do something that's so creative and creating something that's not video, that I can talk about things that aren't necessarily wedding, filmmaking, video gear related. And I use the term like technology very loosely about the things that I talk about with people, because I think that technology impacts everybody and no matter kind of where they are. So I can pretty much talk to anybody and have any sort of conversation and sort of like loosely tie into technology. Like the Price is Right episode literally is just all about my friend who was on The Price is Right and won the whole showcase on The Price is Right, which I mean, sort of is technology because it's a TV show and it's on TV, so it's like kind of loosely there. So I try not to stick to, too hard and fast when it comes to the technology thing. But yeah, so I've been loving it. And it's a new skill to learn, like how to interview, how to hold a conversation, how to speak well, all these different like little mini personal challenges with no real like repercussions, right? Because I'm not being paid to do it. I'm not even trying to make any money off of it. It's really just for fun. So I don't feel as much pressure to perform or to turn something around so quickly or so perfectly, or I can experiment a little bit more and not be so worried about the end result or somebody being mad or whatever.
Well, and you already mentioned like some of those like positive ways that it's a hobby more or less, and it's still kind of giving you kind of meaningful interactions, whether it's new people or deepening connections that you might have with kind of people part of your current network. But yeah, how it helps you to learn new things, and certainly helped me be a lot more conscious of like how I speak and how I kind of interact with people and stuff. So I don't know if there's anything else that, maybe when you have like, the kind of off season or, that rare off weekend from weddings and stuff, like other stuff that you geek out about that you do to relax and unwind, and like sort of how those things have kind of positively contributed to your life in terms of, just like those hobbies and interests.
Yeah. Like I said, I love getting into new things, and every time I get in, and it doesn't matter what it is, I'm always going to like research all of like the gear and the tech and the techniques and like the best way to do, and it doesn't matter what it is. So in my those things have varied over the years. From I got really into like weightlifting for a little bit, and like learning all the different techniques and all the different gear you might need, or the different ways to do overhead squat or whatever, those types of things. I got into running, so like what shoes should I get for my foot type, or like what are all the different things people have for running, what are the best like techniques, like whatever it is, I just get into it. So like YouTube is something that I'm always like super passionate about. I love watching stuff on Netflix. We have Movie Pass, which I talk a little bit about on my podcast, but Movie Pass has been huge for me. I got it in January, so going to a lot of different movies and the freedom to go to see movies that I wouldn't maybe normally see, but then being able to learn, watching them sort of from a filmmaker perspective of, how are they lighting this? How is this shot? How is it? Whatever. Even if I don't care as much about like the story, or it may not be a movie that I would maybe pay to go see, trying, just opening myself up to different things and trying to learn stuff like that. I've been really into hiking recently. We live here in Virginia. There's tons and tons of amazing places to go hiking and to explore and stuff like that. So I've been really into hiking, and of course figuring out like the best gear and the different things that you need, and the best shoes and the best this whatever, and finding all the different like YouTube channels about people who are hikers and whatever, like all those different things. And like just podcasts in general. But and I think that for like you asked like how is it like beneficial to my life, or how does that positively sort of impact my life? Like I said, I think that having this sort of curiosity about things in life, and then just this ability to sort of research everything allows me to make really informed decisions about pretty much anything in my life. I'm pretty confident that if I wanted pretty much anything that I want to do, if I put my mind to it, I can research it enough, find out enough about it to do it and do it well. I don't like going into things unprepared. I don't like going into things and making like uninformed decisions. So all of my passions sort of fall under that, and sort of are a good training ground for teaching me how to teach myself how to do whatever it might be. So whether that's like something I know nothing about, which is like cars, is something I know absolutely nothing about. Grew up, if you need a headlight change, you take it to the dealership because that's just how it goes. Right, I never knew how to do anything about cars. But now, like my father-in-law was a mechanic for a number of years, and like he knows a lot about cars. So learning from him, but also knowing like, hey, I can go on YouTube if I really need to know how to do something. I can go on YouTube and like figure it out, or whatever it might be. And it gives me like kind of the confidence to do those types of things, and just being as well-rounded as possible, I guess, just in my different passions and technologies, and using things like podcasts to learn more about current events and the news, because I hate watching the news because it makes me cringe from a production standpoint. The local news just makes my brain hurt. Right. But I like listening to podcasts, just so I can stay informed about the government and things that are going on in a way that I never have been before. I used to be very uninformed, and I just like didn't really care. So yeah, I think there's lots of positives to being slightly obsessive and compulsive about certain things.
Well, no, yeah, I think it's, you just kind of reframe it. It's like that very proper geeky, nerdy kind of personality. Like, you kind of deep dive as you kind of, because it seems like maybe like they might be kind of like a phase in the sense of like, you're not obviously like always going to be as deeply into each individual thing, but it's like you kind of really absorb a lot of information, and you'll kind of have like, sort of the greatest hits about like the important things to know about hiking. And, you'll be like, well, this is how I do it. I learned a lot, and like I kind of trimmed all this information I just learned. But yeah, it's like you have kind of a growth mindset. You're like, if I need to figure something out, I'm confident in the fact that I probably can. I know where to go to learn about it. And, even if you're not always into the things that you explore, you can, I assume have like an appreciation for just like people who are like super into hiking. Like, yeah, I get it. Like, oh, there's like cool, gear to do this, that, the other thing, or anything like that. And because it's like, certainly the dark side of being like really into the things that you're into is like everybody has to enjoy them in the way that I enjoy them. Or if you don't like the thing that I like, I hate you or what, but it's just like, yeah, you kind of like, because I definitely feel like I'm, like I'll sort of like do a lot of like appetizers of different just in terms of like, oh yeah, like I have gotten into Twitch recently, or I watch a lot of YouTube videos, or like, yeah, I'm listening to these different podcasts, or yeah, I played this game for a little bit, and just like kind of like, sample everything and just have an appreciation of it, even though it's like, well, yeah, I'm not as into it as anybody else might be, but just have an understanding of what sort of the appeal might be. But yeah, and it's all
I love
cool
to take like a deep dive into it, just kind of get as much information as I can, absorb as much as I can kind of right away. And obviously I'm never going to know as much about somebody who's been hiking on a regular basis for 15 years, but just like knowing enough that I can either like I can go do it and enjoy it and know that I'm like not going to like hurt myself or make a fool of myself or whatever. Right. And then I can like converse with people about it in a way that sounds like intelligent, even though it may not be something that I'm like super knowledgeable of. Like I know enough to just like kind of be dangerous, and I feel like I kind of have spread that across like a variety of things. So I know just like you said, like a deep but like not so deep amount of information like I can absorb like really quickly, and then just kind of keep that and have that for a long time. But then there are certain things that I've been passionate about for a long time, like filmmaking and video and things like that have been sort of like an ongoing passion for years and years and years. So I'm going keep going deeper and deeper in that. And I think you have to be able to like go learn something else and then kind of circle back. Like if I was just only focused on filmmaking and learning more about filmmaking and cameras and whatever, 365, all the time, eventually you kind of get burned out on that. So I kind of like to go like invest in other stuff, research on other stuff, and then kind of come back to something like, always sort of coming back to filmmaking. Okay, what's something else new I can learn? What's a new technique? What's a new this or whatever? And then you kind of get to a point where you're like, okay, I feel pretty good about this. And you go to something else and you sort of always find your way back to those main things that you're passionate about. But yeah, I love being able to talk to people about like almost anything that comes up. I have, like I said, just enough information to hold a conversation and to sound like I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And especially with like news or sports or something, just being like, oh, kind of like dabble or, because it's like, if you're not talking to me about video, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. Like, just like,
right. Yeah.
Like, we can only talk to Tyler about video, I guess. I don't know. Like, he doesn't know about anything else. It's like, yeah.
And like sports is a good thing too. Like I love pretty much any sport. Like I feel like I know like the rules, like the understanding, the basic strategy of pretty much like any sport. Certain sports I know better than others. Like I played ice hockey for 15 years. So obviously I know more about ice hockey than I do about some other things like football. I know enough about football where I can, again, converse. I know all the rules, and I know I can watch a game and be into it and passionate about it and have a general idea of like the positions. But somebody who's actually played football knows a lot more about like the responsibilities of a defensive tackle than I have. I don't really know. Like I know that that's where that generally is and generally what they do, but I've never played defensive. I've never played football in my whole life. So I don't really know what it's like to be a defensive tackle or what it's like to do any of these things, but I know enough about it. And then I love getting into like the playoffs of anything, like whatever it is. I'll watch any of the Masters for golf. I'll watch the final for the U.S. Open for tennis. I'll watch. When I was traveling to South Africa and I got super into cricket. Right, it happened to be the Cricket World Cup was on, and the guy in South Africa was teaching me about cricket. So I got super into cricket and learned everything I could about cricket for 3 weeks. Haven't really watched cricket since, but I know a lot about it now, and it was something I was super interested in learning more about. So I think that it's a personality thing, but I also think that it's good just to sort of have that in general, because I feel like there's so many people who I talk to in photography or video or whatever that are doing things just like very ineffectively, or like they just like don't understand like really basic things that can really get you into trouble if you don't understand these basic things. So I think there is value to knowing how to at least get like a baseline so that you're not going to make like a major mistake or like doing something very ineffectively for a long period of time. But then there's also certain things that I know or certain things that I get passionate about that people could probably argue are a waste of time because they don't really matter to my life or anybody else's life. But I don't know. I think it's just a personality thing as well.
Well, I think like, because like you said, you can bring it back to like the kind of the core things that for one, are like your job or just your main hobbies that you've always been into. And like, if, yeah, like you got into hiking, you learned a lot about it and you then like do it occasionally, you might be like, well, I could like use a GoPro to film hiking, and you can sort of like bring in your kind of core, geekdoms, as I say, like in your core geekdoms into other things or vice versa. But then like, yeah, I think the main takeaway that, because I feel like I'm kind of striving in that direction as well. It's just like never being intimidated by not knowing something or understanding it, because again, like you have the confidence to be like, well, I will learn about that, or like, yeah, like I'll absorb as much as I can to understand it. And also, yeah, I can help you to have that curiosity and bond with people with what they might be like really into. And that's like the main geekdom for them. Like, yeah, they love cricket, and you're like, I know nothing about that. Please teach me. I'm not like intimidated, be like, oh my God, just like,
right.
You sort of blow it off. It's just like, yeah, you have that openness and kind of the growth mindset and just can connect with people, which is always what I'm like striving to do with this show, is that, yeah, there's a lot of times people talk about stuff and it's like, we have the exact opposite sort of like fandoms. Like I'm not,
right.
Not as much into Nintendo, unfortunately. Like I played them growing up, but some people are like, I love it. It's like always been my like video game system. And I'm like, I mean, yeah, I appreciate it, but I don't play it as much anymore. But I'm not going to like, again, also be like, oh, if you don't like what I like, your opinions are wrong or something. It's just like having appreciation and, sort of learning from other people and having that openness and stuff. So, yeah, that's great.
Yeah. And that's why I love my podcast, because I got to talk to like a bunch of different people from sort of like all different areas, all walks of life. It doesn't kind of really matter where they're coming from. Just sort of that curiosity mindset helps me to like, I can talk to anybody for an hour. Like it doesn't really matter. We can have an interesting conversation for an hour just because my curious brain will want to know. If it's something I know nothing about, that's probably even better, because that just means I have a million different questions and we can, keep this thing rolling for an hour to find out. And like with the Price is Right, that was genuine. Just I've always wanted to know those things, and it was just like getting to ask every question I never had. So yeah, and I think it's a good skill to have. I think it's a good thing to possess. So yeah, it's great.
Yeah, encourage more folks to nurture that within themselves. So and if there's kind of anything within, I've seen a lot of movies or, listening to podcasts and all those things that you kind of consume, anything sort of noteworthy recently, or just kind of like all-time favorites, anything that like you're reading, watching, listening to that you like to recommend that we can include in the show notes?
Yeah. So I'm definitely not a big reader. I read like one book a year, and usually we're at the beach for vacation in the summer. Right. And I usually try and pick a book that's going to become a movie for whatever reason. That's been my habit for the last couple of years. But so listen to a ton of podcasts. I have a couple. I wrote them down so I didn't forget. So just some of I listen to way too many, but the ones I kind of listen to regularly are The Daily from the New York Times, which is where I kind of get all my general information about the world. I think that it's good. It's not super leaning, I don't think, one way or the other. Some people might argue differently than that, but I like it because it offers what to me seems like a viewpoint that I can appreciate, even if I don't agree with everything they say. They don't say it in like a super hostile way. So The Daily is really good. Armchair Expert is a newer podcast by Dax Shepard, and it's just a really interesting insight into sort of like the lives and the personalities of these like pretty major celebrities that he has on his podcast, but speaking in like a, I don't know, kind of humanizing the whole celebrity experience and bringing it to a level that people can understand. I think it's really interesting. It's borderline inappropriate, some of it what they talk about, depending on depending on where you're coming from. Yeah, but he talks very openly about being addicted to cocaine for like 15 years, and how he's getting clean from that. But so it's really interesting. Vergecast is one of my favorite tech podcasts. I've listened to that for years. H3 podcast, again, also sort of like inappropriate in certain ways, but I think that they have a really interesting insight into certain things. I like that they don't think anything like me. Like they're pretty much the opposite of me and how they think about things, but I like hearing their opinions on things, and it's funny sometimes. And then, the classic How I Built This is kind of one of my favorites. To kind of fall back on, just more about like entrepreneurship and things like that, which as a like business owner really speak to me. And then YouTube, Casey Neistat, like everyone listens to Casey or follows Casey Neistat. The Verge, Mango Street, I think is a really interesting podcast or YouTube channel rather. They're very super creative. They're based out of LA. They've just blown up. I think they reached like 1 million subscribers in like a year or something crazy like that. Wow. And then I've been listening to a lot of Beats One interviews on YouTube, just because I find it very interesting to hear people whose jobs it is to interview people and kind of take that and harness that and try and use those skills and see how they do certain things for my own podcast and stuff like that. So yeah, those are pretty much the things I'm into, plus a million other things. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure. Yeah. If folks like follow you and want to like, engage on social media, if they were like, so wait, like, what is your like video channel that you watch, or, like wedding videos or something, or yeah, obviously they can find your stuff, and I'm sure you share a lot of good resources for like, your own YouTube channel as well. So, but yeah, we'll wrap up the episode here as we always do. If you just want to kind of on the optimistic note, something or things that you were looking forward to in your job, life, and or the world.
Yeah, that's a really good question.
It's a big one.
So we're actually taking the whole month of July off, which we really intentionally try to do this year because, like I said, normally we work our butts off throughout the entire summer, and it's just like this crazy marathon of sleeplessness and being tired all the time. So we're taking the whole month of July off. So I'm excited for that, like a little break, which sounds like a weird thing to be excited for, I guess. But I think that's going to be good for us. I think it's going to be smart. Hopefully we're going to try and do some traveling in there. Hopefully go to some place where we can do some hiking and stuff like that. So I'm excited for that, and just to sort of, be able to step away from things for a little bit. Something completely unrelated to technology. Like I said, I played ice hockey my whole life, and I'm from the Washington, D.C. area, and the Washington Capitals are actually in the Stanley Cup Finals for the first time ever. Or not the first time ever. First time in my lifetime. The first time in a very, very long time since I've been a fan anyway. So I'm excited for that. Last night we lost game 1, but that's okay. I'm just excited for that series. I'm excited to see what's going to end up happening. And I just can't wait to see who ends up winning. I don't know. I'm excited about that. And in the world, gosh, there's so many things. I think the power that like education and the internet provides people, I think that I'm excited to see kind of where we're able to take that in the years going forward. And I think that the shift away from sort of having to live the American dream and shift away from having to follow a very specific path at a very specific timeline. I'm excited to sort of see where the next generation of people are able to sort of take that. Even people, I guess this would be kids who are like in high school now or even a little bit younger than that, just to see what the world will look like where that is more of the norm, as opposed to just like you have to go to college as soon as you graduate and you have to do this, you have to get a job, you have to do, X, Y, and Z. So I'm excited to see where the world goes from that.
Yeah. Well, and that's certainly, my day job kind of works in that sort of like lifelong learning, digital education kind of thing. And, people being able to, like if your path kind of zigs and zags or whatever, it's, kind of whatever might be calling to you, or if you're needing to make a career shift for one reason or another, there's just, a lot more like platforms and accessibility to do those sort of things. And, because we're like living through, I think, like these sort of like millennial phase, or sort of like the wave of the big change being like freelance, remote, and just like these different things. And it's like, who knows what's going to be like the next wave? Like, but it's just an idea. Like, certainly people can follow their own path, and even if it's sort of just kind of the quote unquote like side hustles or something, that it can be a hobby, it can be something that they're compensated for, that they really find a lot of meaning for, and positively contributes to your life, and it can be this unique intersection of their passions and strengths and stuff. So it's like, like it's an amazing time right now in that regard. And it's just like I'm certainly the optimist as well, of just like believing in kind of collective humanity's capacity to just like keep making things better, where it's like it is a long arc for sure, and things can be kind of tough in the moment, but we're certainly getting to an interesting place. And if it's like just the way that things work, I mean, it's like maybe I can't even conceptualize what that would look like, because I'm sure a lot of people didn't even predict kind of where we are now. So it's just just kind of go along for the ride. And I'm just always very much just kind of like a futurist, and like sort of enjoying technology and kind of how it augments things and changes things. But
because like that's my story, like when I was in college, I never in a million years thought I was going to be doing this. I stumbled into it 100%. It was one of those things that just kind of kept growing and just kept making more sense, and we kept making more money. And then it got to a point where it's like, it doesn't make sense for me to have a normal job, because the amount of time I would spend there, I can make way more money doing what I'm doing at home, or even if it's the same amount of money, because it's not like we're making significantly more than I would if I had a salary job doing something in a similar field, but the freedom that we have to go on vacation whenever we want and not have to worry about taking paid time off, or if we want to take a day off because we're tired, or we want to go do whatever, like we have the freedom to do sort of whatever. And there's a lot of sort of scary things that come with that. We don't have consistent income necessarily. We've got to make everything that we're going to make. Nothing is guaranteed. We've got to go out there and make it happen. But at the same time, the sky's the limit. So I think there's, tons of value to working for yourselves and living, entrepreneurial life. And for us, we know we're not going to do weddings forever. We've been doing it for, 5 years now. But we're looking, towards the future of having a family and those types of things. And we know that the life we're living right now is not sustainable long term. So that's another like scary / like exciting thing, is to sort of see like, who knows where I'm going to be 5 years from now, 10 years from now, hopefully, doing something related to what I'm passionate about. And it's like hard to imagine ever going back to a normal, 9 to 5 type of corporate sort of environment. But, who knows? Yeah, who knows what the future holds? And I think that's both really exciting, kind of scary at the same time. But yeah, and the beauty of it is, like you said, like the possibilities are endless. There's no set thing that we have to do or some set rule that we have to follow. We can kind of make our own way and make our own path. And I think that's exciting.
Yeah. Well, I think that is a beautiful moment to end on here. Really appreciate your time, Tyler. And we'll have ways in the show notes for folks to connect with you and all the things that you mentioned. And again, thank you so much. And just have a good rest of your day and good rest of your week.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks, man. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
This podcast is a proud member of the Connect EDU podcast network, bringing together diverse voices and thoughtful discussions to the higher ed community. Check us out online at connectedu.network or on Twitter at connectedupod. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the podcast. Please rate, review, and subscribe so you'll never miss an episode. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode of the Higher Ed Geek podcast.